Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Star Wars Rebels episode review. This one's going to be for Season 2, Episode 14, Homecoming. And this was, in my mind, a okay episode. I I felt it had the potential to be very good, but it made, in my mind, a lot of mistakes that really kind of brought it down. Because obviously this is the episode where Cham Syndulla comes back into things. Hera and her father reunite for the first time in a long time. We've had little hints at setup just about the fact that things aren't completely alright between those two. That the last time she talked about her past, she specifically didn't mention her father and only mentioned her mother, who was dead. So they'd set this up reasonably well that, okay, when Cham comes back, there's going to be some stuff's going to happen. And to some extent it does. I just feel like they really failed to fully capitalize on the emotion that the moment should have had. And I think a lot of that comes down to a mistake that they've been making a lot in this season. Like Dave Filoni and a lot of the kind of producers behind the show have really been like highlighting this first kind of three quarters of this season as basically being, yeah, we're delving into the characters' past and to learn more about them. But we haven't seen one single flashback the entire run of this show. We've never seen one flashback. Whereas this is probably the Star Wars thing most in need of a flashback. Like I suppose Force visions and stuff like that we've kind of seen a little bit, but for the most part, no flashbacks. This episode I felt absolutely should have had one. To show, I suppose, how they left on bad terms, or what exactly was the kind of final straw that really separated the two. Because they just talk quite vaguely about it. Like, you don't fully know when the exact details of how Hera left. She just mentions that, like, when the Clone Wars ended and the Republic became the Empire, Cham started fighting against them, and he became more obsessed with just defeating the people rather than um, his family. Like around that time, the mother died, and he just focused on defeating the Empire rather than caring about Hera. She decided to join the rebellion and left. He didn't agree with that because he's so obsessed with Ryloth. They should have shown the real moment that caused the rift, that really had have the two on such separate kind of paths. Because it's definitely a case of they told us instead of showing us it, and they've done that a lot this season. I just feel like this was the moment where it was absolutely required. You can't just mention that and have that be the case. That's like in so many other shows, like Avatar, like this is probably the one most people on my channel will know. That's like Zuko only telling us how he got his scar by like saying one line of dialogue. Yeah, I was forced into an Agni with my father, and he did this to me. It has some impact, like this episode, but it doesn't have the same impact of the flashback showing you how the Agni happened, how Zuko got the scar, the details, who was watching, who was there. It's just so much more detail in a very similar amount of time, and I don't get why they're not doing a flashback. I think a lot of the episodes this season could have really used it to help out. Like the Zeb episode should have had a flashback. The Sabine episode, it would have been hard to choose an exact moment, but perhaps some little flashback moment. They actually probably should have had a flashback for the Kanyo Onyo. I can't remember the name, but Sabine's former friend who's also a bounty hunter, and they're friends again. That one would have worked, but absolutely this one needed it because there was emotion in this episode for sure. Seeing them kind of be on opposite sides of this situation, but Hera needing his help and him needing her help, but them having opposite views on what to do about. Okay, there's this basically this giant ship that is really good for docking starships in. The Republic want this so they can use their fighters more effectively, But Cham, all he wants to do is destroy it to give the people of Ryloth hope. And they disagree on this. Eventually what happens is that ship calls for reinforcements and the Star Destroyer comes in, and what happens is that they come to a compromise and that, like, okay, we'll take this ship, but we'll use the ship to destroy the reinforcements coming in, and we'll both get what we want. So the people of Ryloth are inspired, and the Republic have what they need, and Hera and Cham are on much better terms now. And to some extent, I liked what they actually talked about in regards to addressing the problem between them, and that there's the scene with Hera and Ezra talking about, he doesn't care about what's important, family, and then Ezra saying, there's nothing more important to me than family. Potentially setting up some sort of an issue with attachments for him, but the episode really wasn't a Ezra-focused episode. And I like that one just to establish that that's fundamentally the issue between them. In her mind, he is focused on stuff that he shouldn't be, and from his perspective, she's also focused on stuff she shouldn't be. And they both kind of blame each other for their relationship breaking down. But it kind of fundamentally comes down to the fact that he just wants to destroy a ship and is not seeing anything else. Whereas, like, they're technically on the same side, they're just different cells of rebels. And he was willing to basically take this good plan away from the rebels just for the sake of giving the people of Ryloth a bit of hope. So it was a interesting dynamic that they had there, and it was just her basically saying that, look, like him admitting, like, you've really developed into an attitude that's very similar to your mother's, but she's saying, like, no, the leadership, the want to join the rebellion, that came from you. But this is what we need to do. This is important for the rebellion going forward. As leader, this is the plan that I want to do. Take this ship. And he eventually agrees to help. And that's when, obviously, you get the moment from the other two, I think Gobi and Numa, who also agree to help Hera, and then he joins up. So that was reasonably well done, but it really did lack the impact I think it should have had. It wasn't as powerful as it should have been. Some of the other stuff in the episode, Numa, really interesting that they brought this character back. She was obviously the little girl on Ryloth from the Clone Wars, I think the very end of Season 1, where two of Obi-Wan's troops, Waxer and Boyle, they basically found her in the ruins of a city and helped her back to freedom and stuff like that. So we've basically seen her grow from being a little child to being, like, I suppose at this stage she's probably like 18, 19, 20 or something like that, depending on how old she was back then. But it was interesting to see that character come back and be in this role, supporting Cham, who's obviously from the same planet. He was the leader of the rebellion during the Clone Wars, during Ryloth. I did like the references to those episodes. Cham and Kanan talking about Mace Windu, and those episodes where they fought on that hollow bridge and stuff like that. That was very cool to see. And I liked Kanan having an interest in Cham because of the kind of connection to his master. Like, Depa Billab's master was Mace, so to some extent there's a connection between him and Mace Windu, and they seem to establish that he talked to Mace at some point, and Mace mentioned Cham to him. But the other side of Kanan in this episode was the fact that he was very careful to look presentable in front of Cham, because there's something between Hera and Kanan which for some reason they just seem to be going completely vague on. I really wish they just like addressed that. It just, the longer that goes on without them addressing what their relationship is, it's going to get really frustrating, I think, as it goes on. This episode, I think, made it very clear that Kanan cares about how Hera's father thinks of him, and that's in relation to the sort of romantic relationship that they have. They were definitely hinting towards that, but they never really properly addressed it. Just like they never really addressed any sort of connection of Numa to those episodes, it was left completely for you to figure it out. I don't know how effective of a way there was to really do that with Numa, but because Cham was the focus, but still, the Kanan stuff was fun, but I would have appreciated like Kanan mentioning his master, mentioning the connection with Mace Windu, and just a little bit of further addressing what Kanan and Hera's relationship is, because other than that, it was just this weird thing where he just became like Cham's fanboy. It was kind of weird. Um, Anything else to talk about with the episode? The scene where Hera's accent reverts to, I suppose, the Ralothian accent, I suppose, the kind of French sounding one. Now we know for a lot of Twi'lek sound like this. Cham, of course, speaks like that. Numa, Gobi, they both have that accent. The Jedi Aayla Secura from the Clone Wars, she also had the kind of French Twi'lek accent. And it was interesting to see in this emotional scene where she kind of gets angry at her father, her going from the very kind of American sounding accent to little bits of the French accent coming in, just to kind of show that she's so emotional that just her time spent around people who don't have that accent has kind of shifted it, but it then reverts back being around the people who do have that accent. That was a really nice scene that got that definitely got some emotion across just with the switching of the accent. They only did it in that one scene, but it was quite nicely done. I don't know if they're ever really going to use it again, but it was just it was a nice thing to do, to even think about the whole accent thing. Like, wait, why does she have an American kind of very neutral accent, whereas like everyone else from her species seems to have a kind of fancier accent? So there was that, but yeah, that's really about all there is in the episode. You know, there was a cool action sequence actually with Kanan and Ezra, where all the sequence of doors was closing, and like Kanan catapults Ezra with the Force like halfway up the corridor, and then Ezra then catapults Kanan all the way up, and they just really effectively navigate those corridors. That was a cool sequence to see. But other than that, it was just like, okay, it's another one of these episodes where we have a character moment framed in a kind of important thing for the rebellion to do, in the sense of like, okay, this giant docking station ship for with all the landing bays is important for the rebellion and Phoenix Squadron, but are we ever going to see it again? Are we? Was this actually an important get for the rebellion? It seems to be, just based on what they set up at the start of the episode with the loss of that pilot. They're running out of pilots. They need the ships to be more effective. But it's one of those things where like I I think everyone wants the plot to be more character focused and just relating to the characters. Like the rebellion gradually growing bigger, executing these operations to become bigger are fine, but so much of the episodes have been focusing on getting this piece of intel, getting this plans for these type of ships, stealing these certain ships, fuel, electricity, whatever. It's just like, please just have an episode where the focus is, say, like coming up, Ahsoka finally has a plan on how to figure out the mystery of Darth Vader, connection to Anakin, sort of thing. That's going to be like a character focused episode that is not directly related to rebel forming sort of stuff. So yeah, final thoughts on the episode. It was good, but not as good as it could have been. This should have been a really, really strong Hera episode, and it only came out as like a good Hera episode. And I think now to Sabine, we've learned a little bit more about her and her Mandalorian history. I think Hera is now the character in most need of like, okay, what is really going on with you? I just feel like she is kind of getting to the point where she is one of the less interesting characters, despite her being kind of technically one of the more important ones, being basically one of the rebellion leaders. It just seems like all the Jedi characters are fascinating. Zeb has this interesting history with his planet and learning all about that. Sabine and the Mandalorians, but for her it's just like her father, and she's a pilot, and that's just kind of, I think, holding her character back a little bit. But hopefully something more notable can happen, and then of course like there's really interesting stuff like, will we get to see Rex do anything again this season? Will we get to see Ahsoka? You know, of course we know she's going to do more this season and stuff like that. Final thing about this episode, actually, it just came to my mind there. We basically got the origin of Chopper, in that they mentioned that she found this kind of, I think, broken down kind of astromech droid on the planet, and then basically has kept that up until now. So Hera found Chopper initially, so it was her and Chopper on the ship, and then Kanan joined, and so on. So Chopper has been basically one of the original Ghost crew members. So that's a really interesting thing to note. I suppose actually now thinking about it as well, with Hera, one interesting thing they could do in the future is establish the history of the Ghost. Like, where did she get that ship from? It's very unique, and stuff like that. It's been very reliable so far. So, like, what's her history with that ship and where does it come from? That would be an interesting story. But yeah, that's been the episode review. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode. I've seen other reviews, and a lot of other people seem to really like this episode a lot and think it's a really strong, like, emotional episode. But what were your thoughts on it, and what were your thoughts on my review? Other than that, thanks for watching this video, and bye.